All right, we are on. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Weekly Dose with Dr. Uday. I have a treat for you. I have Dr. Anderson with us. She's going to be talking all about midlife crisis. So I think this is something that is going to be very helpful to a lot of people out there. So before we get right into it, I'll start with introductions. My name is Dr. Uday. I'm a board certified family physician based in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I have a primary care practice, namely Apple Medicine, and I also provide aesthetic services. And with both modalities, my goal is to have not only feeling good, but looking good. So, let's get right to it. So, Dr. Teresa Anderson specializes in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. She opened the first psychiatric-based ketamine infusion clinic in the state of Ohio and is one of the only 12 providers in the country to provide PRTMS, a revolutionary form of non-medication alternative treatment. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson, for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yay. So let's get right to it. So midlife crisis, I think is a really important topic. I get questions about it quite a bit. And so we're going to be getting it from information from the perspective of a psychiatrist. And so, Dr. Anderson, what would you say to?
So it's a complicated problem. So it's not exactly a DSM diagnosable condition, right? It's more of a state of being, and one might call it an existential crisis. It's more in the state of 40s to 50s. We cross that arbitrary line over which we are a little step closer to death than we are birth. And for a lot of people, that causes sort of an internal and sometimes external freak out, right? And so people start behaving differently. They try to recapture their youth. Lots of Botox and surgeries, lots of diets and exercise, and maybe even extramarital affairs, or buying that really snazzy sports car that, instead of our children's college education. But it happens for so many reasons, because around that time of middle age, as we call it, there are lots of changes that are happening. It's the stress of work, the increased financial responsibility. You have frequently kiddos that are either going through transitions or going to college, and you might be empty nesting, stress on your marriage, or the stress of really being sort of on autopilot, because all of those things take precedence over your relationship frequently. All those working mamas know what I'm talking about. And also just, this is when illnesses start showing up too, not just of our aging parents and family members. We may have to become caretakers again, or, this is when people start getting diagnosed with breast cancer or colon cancer, or start having illnesses of their own, or start having to treat hypertension. And all of these things really plague a person, where if it was one issue, you're diagnosed with allergies as a 20-year-old, okay, whatever, I'll just take Flonase, who cares? But it's sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, where it's just one more thing on top of the other, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's you can't get away from the piling up on your shoulders of all the weight of the world that's sort of pulling on you. So a couple things that we need to consider is getting down to some of the root causes of it. Especially around the time of COVID, a lot of people were operating in a state of constant overwhelm, right? Mm-hmm. Is there something that you can do to possibly delegate some tasks in your to-do list to other people so you'd feel less overwhelmed? For instance, I learned the joys of grocery delivery during COVID, and I haven't gone back. So it saves a good 8 hours in my week. A week. That's like a whole day, right? So, is it possible that you can get the lawn mown instead of spending all your weekend and exhausted and tired from your job and then dealing with the lawn too? Is it possible that you can get flowers planted or landscaped? Is it possible that you can do like a ride share with the kiddos who have to go to soccer? So you only have to take Junior to soccer, band camp, academic team, whatever, once a week instead of 80 times a week. So all of these things can contribute to the whole overwhelmedness of it all, right? Another thing that we need to consider too is when we're feeling this way, literally the last thing that we want to do is focus on self-care. We would go home and grab a drink and pass out on the couch and call it a night and just forget it. So when these times happen, it's even more important to focus on our self-care. And that means penciling yourself in first. So when you look at your schedule, before you put in Junior soccer practice, before you put in play dates, before you put in college exams, before you put in anything else, you schedule yourself first. It sounds like a selfish act, but it's actually a self-preservation act.
Not at all.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to 100% agree. Not selfish at all, because if you don't put yourself first, you certainly are going to run on fumes. And then those that you're actually trying to take care of, you're not doing a job of it anyway. So
Absolutely. The other thing too is, this chronic sense of overwhelm may be leading to burnout, fatigue. You may be vitamin deficient. You may need to have your thyroid checked. You may be anemic. You need to rule out all these easy fixes that could be a medical cause of overwhelm, first and foremost. And secondly, if none of those issues are the problem and it's just life overwhelm, it might be time to talk to somebody like me. And so being able to share your thoughts and feelings with a therapist and talk therapy, it doesn't matter what kind. The studies show that as long as you have a good rapport with your therapist, you have a better outcome. It doesn't matter if it's CBT, DBT, psychodynamic psychotherapy, psychoanalytic psychotherapy, whatever you can afford at the frequency you can afford it, do it. Find somebody, and if you don't like them, go somewhere else. I always tell people finding a therapist sometimes is harder than dating, because you tell the therapist things that you might not even put on your diary or tell your spouse. And so you have to feel very comfortable and very safe in a non-judgmental environment to be able to share these things with people. And so it's important, again, to do that for yourself. Making sure that you're eating right and exercising on the regular, also important, because if your brain isn't fueled, you can't do anything else. The last thing is in terms of relationships. As we get older, we lose people, we lose friends, we lose family members, we lose colleagues. It's so very important to foster the relationships that you have with people. And I'll speak in terms of marriage, for instance. The grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. The grass is greener where you water it.
You got it. That is so important.
Unless you are suffering with physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, and you need to get out, and you need support to get out, it's going to be cheaper and easier in the long run to work on your relationship in your marriage than it is to get a divorce. Always. For everybody involved. And so a lot of people don't want to hear that. But why did your relationship in the beginning go well? Because you put time and effort into it.
You dated. Yeah.
You dated each other. Why does your garden look beautiful? Because you spend time weeding it.
Absolutely.
Why does your blanket look so gorgeous? Because you practice knitting. You have to spend time and exert effort to make sure that the relationships that matter in your life are the ones that you carry with you lifelong. And it shouldn't just be unilateral. It should be bilateral. And if part of the overwhelm that you're feeling is because you're not in a bilateral relationship and not a giving and receiving synchronous partnership, then go to couples therapy. Check out and see if you can work on these problems together. If both of you are interested in working on these problems together, that you can at least communicate the problems that you have to begin with, instead of just burying your head in the sand and then exploding when it gets to be too much.
It's a really good point. It's that there's no perfect relationship situation. You have to, and you grow and change. And so you definitely have to put that effort in. I really love this. I'm going to recap some of that because there's such good information. And I was going to, my perspective on it, every time I thought about midlife crisis was you're kind of facing your mortality, one, and then you have ailing parents at the same time, and then you either have teenage kids that are older, and then so it's all of it wrapped up in one, and it is just it can be a ball of disaster. Don't get ahead of it. And then with your tips, I love that. Delegate, delegate, delegate. Big one that I've started doing. Self-care. So that's amazing because that helps with the health piece of it. Because obviously, if you're taking care of yourself, your health is usually a lot of the physical self-care usually takes care of nutrition, weight, and check in with your healthcare professional, just like you said. So to make sure that, mind, body is taken care of. And then always get help. And I really like fostering the relationships because that's actually what feeds the soul in addition to me time. I love it. Thank you so much. So for wonderful tips. So you guys got it, the 5 tips. This is really, really good. So how can people connect with you?
So they can find me online at www.andersonclinic.net. If they happen to be in the Cincinnati area, feel free to call 513-321-1753. Or if they are more of a podcast listener, they can find us on Psych Waves on Apple and Spotify.
I love it. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure.
Yay. So for you guys out there, if you're looking for a primary care physician, we are accepting new patients at Apple Valley Family Medicine. You can find us online at www.applevalleyfamilymed.com. Our phone number is 304-357-87. Enjoy your week. Thanks again. Bye.